welcome to another edition of Beer for Breakfast ABV. I am Danielle from The Moog Show. On the other side today, you're throwing me off on this side, I got Paul Segura, brewmaster from Karl Strauss, and we are going to get scientific today. This is Joe. Joe is the brewing manager from White Labs. How's it going?
Hello, everybody.
What's up, Joe? Good to have
Paul, good to see you again.
So if I understand correctly, White Labs provides the yeast for pretty much every beer out there, right?
We are a major yeast supplier out of San Diego. We also do analytical work and have an R&D brewery and tap room in 2 different locations.
So R&D, so is that like, if I'm a brewer and I want to try some stuff out, but I don't want to make like a whole batch of it, do I come to you guys and use your facility?
Yeah, we've definitely done that with some local breweries.
Nice.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that.
Let's see here. All right, guys. So we're starting out with a porter, and this is WLP004. What does that mean?
That's the Irish ale yeast, and we categorize them all with different numbers. So it's a White Labs pitchable, because we make pitchable yeast that could go directly into a fermentation, right? And it comes from a very famous stout brewery in Ireland.
Oh.
Which could that be?
I'll leave it up to you guys to guess that
All
one.
right.
Let's.
We should cheers
Yes,
before
let's
we
cheers.
delve
Cheers
into
to
this
White
beer.
Labs.
So I think 001 was Cal or Chico.
California ale yeast, yes.
Yes. 002 is British ale yeast.
English.
English.
Uh-oh.
or
English ale yeast.
Okay.
And then
I thought it was British.
Well, 13's British.
Okay.
right?
All
What's
right.
the difference between the British and the English? Don't they come from the same
yeast
place?
strains.
You're going to have to ask them. So with 004, the Irish, you're going to get a lot of more fruity esters. So it's going to have kind of like that jammy flavor that kind of goes with the roasted malts there.
I get it. Yeah. It's good.
That is a good beer. It's nice and toasty.
Yeah.
You said that you guys have this all year round, right? So this is like one of your flagship beers?
Yeah, so we have 3 flagship beers, Pasteur Porter, Hanson, wait, no, I messed up. Tabor IPA, and then Hanson Wheat.
Oh, okay.
So a Hefeweizen, an IPA, and a Porter.
So give me just like a general, I go into White Labs, I want to taste some beers. What do I expect when I get to White Labs?
So you come into the tasting room. First of all, you notice there's Erlenmeyer flasks for lights. There's microscopes in the background. You know, it's a place to nerd out with beer. And you look at our draft list, and you'll notice that there's more than one tap devoted to each style of beer. So you could go in there and you could actually taste the same beer fermented with a different yeast strain.
Oh.
So it's brewed on the same brew house, mash tun, everything, and then just split in half into 2 different fermenters with 2 different yeasts.
Right, so when we're knocking out, it's all brewed on the same batch.
Yeah.
When we knock out, it actually fills up 2 to 4 different fermenters, depending on what we're going for.
That's such an awesome educational tool for people who may not realize all the different flavors that yeast impart into beer. I
guess that was going to be like my next question. Does yeast really change that much? Because I feel like we're always talking about hops. We're always talking about hops and the different hops that are out there, and I never hear about yeast. How different does yeast make a beer?
Yeast is the unsung hero, unfortunately, of beer, and it has over 500 different flavor compounds that are active in every beer, and they play with the hop compounds that we're learning from things like biotransformation, and hazy beers like that too. And so they affect everything from the sight to the mouthfeel to the flavors that are in the beer you're tasting.
I've noticed that myself. So like Cal ale yeast will help accentuate the hops, and maybe the English or British would help accentuate the malt.
Definitely, and like, so the 001 California, that one blew up, especially in San Diego, because it's so hop
and it
forward.
ferments dry.
Right,
It attenuates.
Gets nice and dry, and lets all those hop flavors just come out.
Right. There's less malt to sort of impede the hop flavor.
But then you could even think of other beers like Belgian beers and stuff like that with that phenolic or clovey flavor, and those are almost all yeast driven compounds.
So are there like X amount of strains of yeast, or is there like a new yeast strain that can come out at any time?
Well, as far as yeast for beer goes, they've been domesticated for hundreds of years, right? And they've actually have maps of basically the migration patterns of people as yeast have, as they've brought yeast around. So they've been able to map people's movements based on the yeast and brewing styles that were around in different time periods.
Oh, wow.
So there's hundreds of classic yeasts out there that have been around, but there's also like mutation that constantly takes place, right? So you could theoretically end up with new strains that have been isolated that somebody else started with a couple decades ago or something that have kind of mutated or gotten to a point where a brewery likes the particular flavor or aroma profile or something and then chooses to isolate it.
There is some drift. Brewing yeast is pretty stable, but there is some genetic drift that can happen over time. But a lot of things that come out are newfound strains because there's yeast everywhere, right? There's yeast in this room right now that's capable of fermenting beer maybe. And some people have gone out and found wild beers or had naturally or spontaneous fermentations that were just from the natural flora of the air.
Huh. Fancy that. I was just listening to a podcast that Chef Letty McKenzie from Beerfish was on, and she was talking about harvesting her own yeast when she makes sourdough bread. So is this do you use similar yeast for bread that you use for beer?
Yeah, so they'd both be in the family Saccharomyces cerevisiae, right? So they're the same species, but there are some differences, right? You think of it this way, like the difference between a Chihuahua and a Great Dane's pretty great.
Right.
But they're both canines.
Oh, okay, all right. I like the way you broke that down.
I've always drawn the parallel with flowers, like, you know, you have petunias and gardenias and roses and carnations. They're all flowers, but they look and smell different.
Right, right. It's the same thing with, I like the dog one just because it's actually a species thing, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, and it's all right,
easy to wrap your head around that. Okay, so now we're going to actually, for ourselves, taste the difference in yeast, right?
So we want to kind of take one last flavor of our Irish ale porter and then move on to the 810. So this is actually the San Francisco lager strain.
Oh.
So this is basically a porter or an ale versus a lager comparison.
So this lager strain, is this the one that people would associate with a certain sort of steam beer?
Hey, some kind of common beer near
Common
the San
beer,
Francisco
okay, yeah.
area.
All right.
I would say so.
All right, so I kept a little bit of that other porter in my glass.
I couldn't help it. It tasted so good.
All right.
Well, we want
All
to cheers
right.
on this one?
Yes, let's cheers.
Cheers.
To all the differences.
All right. I taste a little bit more residual sugar.
I don't get as much of like roasty toasty
Right.
as I did in the last
It totally kind of muted the
one.
roast.
Yeah, to me, the biggest change is in that mouthfeel, right? It kind of calms everything down. Like I said, there's not really aromatics there. That's just changing some of the proteins that caused that roasted flavor were reabsorbed and changed by the longer fermentation in a lager yeast.
That's amazing.
Personally, for me, beer number 2 with the 810 is a little bit more drinkable than with the 004. And that's just my own personal palate. Like, I enjoy this.
It all
one
breaks
more.
down to personal palate, I think.
it
'Cause some
does.
people might like the roastiness a little bit more on the first one. But that's the cool thing, is you can go to White Labs at the tasting room and nerd out on this stuff all day.
Totally.
It's fun.
Right, and so there's up to 15 different pairs on at any time, all kind of showing this, the different fermentation profiles.
Yeah.
We also run these on all of our analytical instruments, so if you want to delve into it, you can look up the information. It's all open source.
So let's say I own a brewery. I'm making this beer. I can't figure out why it's not doing what I want it to do. Can I take a sample of it to you guys and you test it to see if maybe there's like a bug in there I didn't want, or like there's something funky going on?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we do everything from like contamination to just running, general calories and alcohol levels to verify with your own lab, or just to get it on a calibrated equipment, because we are a TTB certified lab.
Fascinating.
We just sent beer to your lab to test for gluten. And you guys do that service as well.
That's actually one that's happening more and more is gluten testing.
Yeah.
So
That was pretty cool.
it's pretty hot. Yeah, we actually sell the enzyme that reduces gluten in beers too.
Oh, wow.
And that's becoming more and more popular with like brute IPAs and stuff.
Oh, yeah, I bet. So, Joe, a little bit about your background. How'd you get into yeast? How'd you get into White Labs and beer and all of that stuff?
Well, like a lot of brewers, I started out by home brewing. Actually lab brewing. I worked at Scripps Research Institute, and I might have been putting beer in some of their incubators way back when. But then I actually went to the UC Davis Extension Master Brewers Program.
That's where you went, isn't it?
I went through the American Brewers Guild, which is in Davis.
In Davis, but not UC Davis.
Right.
Got it.
And then I worked at Anheuser-Busch, a small little brewery.
Never heard of them.
Was that Fairfield?
I actually worked at the LA plant.
Oh, okay. Small little brewery.
Little
Being
guy.
facetious, yeah. That's a huge plant.
So back to White Labs. I went there one time, and when I walked in, I saw this classroom-like setting, and I saw a bunch of people diligently working in there. Do you guys do educational classes at White Labs also?
Yeah, you could find all the classes online. One of our most popular ones is called Yeast Essentials. And a lot of people will send their cellarmen and their brewers there just to get an understanding of what yeast is and how to work with it. So it's a practical class with a scientific background.
That sounds like a rad class. I need that class.
I took a safety class there. It was pretty cool.
Knowledge is power.
So I'd like to give, White Labs a nod on behalf of all the brewers in San Diego. A lot of people have asked me, why do you think San Diego became this sort of Napa of beer, if you will? And, some people scratch their heads and go, I don't know, we've got good weather, we've got good brewers, the water's cool, everything else. When I was asked that same question, I said one of the great reasons is White Labs, started in 1995, right when this whole thing was kind of getting off the ground, and we were lucky as a San Diego brewery to have you guys right in our backyard. And Chris and Lisa were there on the scene. Anytime anybody had problems, there was a lot of great support and, clean yeast, and it was awesome. Like, we're spoiled. All the breweries in San Diego were spoiled having you guys in our backyard there to help us.
Right, I think it's like an incalculable part of like how this scene exploded.
Yeah.
I mean, to have Chris as a PhD, doctorate and helping your fermentations,
Right.
how could that not help early on?
Right. Yeah, we could just drive to Mira Mesa and pick up our yeast.
Okay, well, so if you don't live in San Diego and you need yeast, is it one of those, like, you really got to plan all your stuff out to make sure that the yeast is shipped, like, on time and all of those things?
I mean, I kind of wish I knew how it was back in those days, but now we do all 24-hour shipments with FedEx and UPS everywhere. But it must have been a whole different animal in 1995.
All right, so
this is how the yeast kind of comes now, and it's packed in ice and all of that, but
I have something to admit. I didn't know that yeast was liquid.
Yeah, so that's
I had no idea.
That's our pure pitch package. So like the yeast is actually grown in the inner skin of that container.
Oh, so it's not like you made it in one thing, like one vat, and then you put it in this and then shipped it out.
We made it in a big bag, big vessel, right? And then we partitioned it out into many different vessels so that we could actually have a workable volume.
Cool. All right, so as a
continues to
person that's
grow.
never brewed before, at what point do we dump this in?
So after your hot side,
Okay.
right? So you brew your beer, your wort, right? And you add your hops and you extracted all your sugar from the barley, and then you send it over to your fermenter and you cool it down.
Yeah.
Right? Once it's cooled down and aerated, that's the time to pitch your yeast in.
Cool.
And it does all the work.
All right.
I'm guessing we're tasting now a Belgian Quad or Belgian Dark Strong?
Actually, this is
Or it's tasting really
a barley wine.
English barley wine?
Yes.
Okay, I get a lot of raisin and date flavor in this.
So it was aged a year in a whiskey barrel.
Wow.
And actually, I gotta throw out Malahat Spirits gave us these whiskey barrels, and they're right up by us and really cool to work with.
They're
good
local
guys.
also, right?
Yeah, local craft distillery.
Keeping it local. I love it. Well, let's cheers to that. Keeping it local.
11.5 ABV?
Yeah, be careful with this one.
I get
I have
a
a driver.
lot of ethanol, and I get a lot of raisins and dates and prunes and a lot of dark fruit,
Ooh.
aged fruit.
Wow. And this beer is being released this week for San Diego Beer Week, right?
That's correct.
So what does White Labs get involved in for Beer Week? Do you guys have a bunch of stuff going on, or you just kind of like help out everybody else?
Well, we're there with the guild. We have releases going on throughout the week at our tasting room. We have a couple barrel-aged beers. Our farmhouse Saison, which is released, that was also aged a year in white wine barrels.
Ooh.
Nice.
And we threw basically the farm at it, so it's got all of our bugs, and it actually came out really good. I'm kind of proud of it.
Rad. Dude, this beer.
It's another thing we didn't like. People know. I don't know if they
What?
didn't know whether people can buy lactobacillus and Brettanomyces and all sorts of different bugs, like as we call them, from White Labs as well. But they also make blends and
Cool.
yeah.
Oh yeah, we basically got a full zoo from the microbe standpoint.
That's awesome. I love that.
I think some
And in
guys
my
are
head,
just-
I like see like all these like animals running around, but really they're like microscopic
Just one
little
cell at a time.
little things.
Some guys are just buying like yogurt and throwing it in, but I think it's better to figure out a flavor profile before you start the brew and really kind of go
Whoa,
after.
whoa, whoa, whoa. So you're telling me that instead of using this, you can put yogurt in?
Yeah, I'm
Why
not
would you
sure.
do
I would
that?
recommend using this though, and
Yogurt would have a lactobacillus in it, which helps create lactase, which is going to be sour, right? Or
Okay,
lactic
yeah.
acid, right? So it goes through a different fermentation pathway. It doesn't make ethanol, right? It's going to make lactic acid. And people use yogurt as a cheap way to add that bacteria in there.
Ah, I need to come take a class at White Labs. I've never felt so uneducated as I do from this beer for breakfast. All right, well,
like
the next
literally
class.
we could spend hours on yeast and White Labs and how this all comes
This
into
is
play.
fascinating.
We're just glossing over the top.
So you're saying you can find the class schedule on your guys' website, right? Whitelabs.com?
Whitelabs.com.
Sweet. And
And people can buy the book.
There's books.
easiest way to find you guys. I mean, I know you as right next to the 24-hour fitness in Miramar. But
Yeah, that's where it is, right?
basically, if you've been on Miramar and you see the 24-hour fitness, they're right behind it. When you're miserable at the gym and you smell that really wonderful aroma, it's coming from White Labs. Joe, thank you so much for joining us on Beer for
man.
Breakfast. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very, very educational.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks for
Cheers.
all you guys have done over the years.
Paul, happy Beer Week.
Happy Beer Week.
How's your liver holding up?
So far, so good. I mean,
We're
I'm still alive.
halfway-ish.
Yeah, we're halfway through. I'm still alive and kicking. It's been a little rough so far, but
Well, don't
I'll get
forget,
through
91X is broadcasting someplace live every single day of San Diego Beer Week, so you can get that at 91x.com. Come hang out with us, drink some great beer. It's all about San Diego local beer. And Friday morning, Paul's going to come in and talk to myself with the rest of the Moke Show about what you should be drinking this weekend for San Diego Beer Week.
if
And
I'm still alive.
I mean, well, you got to be Collabapalooza's on Saturday.
I know.
Just
I know.
saying.
And it's so much fun.
And I know that all those beers had a little something from White Labs in it, so just
right.
saying, there's the big circle.
That's right.
Thank you so much and cheers.
91X.